Hey there, Jared Julia here. Welcome to the cave. Welcome to the cave. I'm Jared Julia. Thanks so much for joining us as we battle the forces, the evil forces of woke in our education system. What we're going to talk about today is how our education system reproduces society. I guess when you think about it, everything's in the natural world is about reproduction. You think about birds making a nest. You think about most animal activity. It's about reproducing and maintaining the species. And society does that as well. Society reproduces itself so that it can continue on, sort of like in nature, a particular species wanting its bloodline to continue. Almost instinctively, society wants itself to continue as well. And that's why it creates an education system. Also, that's why you and I often teach our children our values. We teach them values, we teach them the English language. Why? Because we want these things to continue. And so society creates an education system so that then the education system can then reflect back society to the next generation. So, no problem, right? Well, actually, it is a problem to the woke, because it's a problem to anyone who is a Marxist, because they want to recreate society. They want to create society in a very, very different image. And that's why the natural tendency for education is so problematic to these guys, is so problematic to the woke. So that's why education almost has to be repurposed for something that it really wasn't meant to do. It's being repurposed to re-educate. It's being repurposed so that the kids that come out of schools can become political activists. It's not that the woke have a specific problem with our value system or with traditional society. If you remember, Marxism did away with Western civilization in Russia. Why? Because that was the existing system before the Soviets took over. But they didn't get rid of Western civilization in China. When the Marxists went into China, they destroyed traditional Chinese culture. And the Nazis in Germany did not have a specific problem with the traditional German culture and the German way of doing things. They simply threw it out because that was the existing system. So systems like this require a removal of the existing system. And of course, Lenin talked about taking the children for a few years, quote, plant a seed so deep, and that so that what grows cannot be uprooted. That's a quote from Lenin. So our children are not being educated. As I said before, they're being re-educated so that they can become political activists. They're not being taught how to think, which is the classical Greek method. They're being taught what to think. And it's interesting how some of these people that had a big influence over our education system are virtually unknown. There's a name that I want you to know, and the name is Paulo Fieri. Paulo Fieri was a Brazilian Marxist his peak was, I guess, in the 50s and 60s. And he wrote a great deal, and a lot of his works were translated from Portuguese into English, and then were brought over to the United States sometime in the 70s and 80s, and really found their way to our public school curriculum starting in the 90s to the present day. In my mind, Fieri has a greater influence over our education system than the last 5 secretaries of education in the last 5 presidential administrations combined. So much of what he wrote, so much of what he believed is in our school system today. So this is why lower math scores, lower scores in general that kids have coming out of the public school system across the board, this is not a failure. This is by design. So this is one thing that if we're going to fight this, we really need to understand it. It's not failure. It's not that the teachers don't have enough time. It's not that the teachers are overworked. It's not this or that. This is by design. So I think that the first thing we need to do is get involved on the local level. But don't do it yourself. Don't just do it with a few friends. Look up who in your state or in your community is already fighting this fight and has already been organized, and join that group. Another organization, a national organization that I happen to love, is courageisahabit.org. Alvin Louis, spelt L-U-I, is the national executive director of that organization. And that's another organization that's doing great work. Also, go on their website right now and you'll be able to find some tips and some strategies on how to fight a lot of what's going on, a lot of the woke indoctrination in our schools. So like I said, there's organizations like that, and there's other organizations out there trying to fight against this. The other thing is homeschooling. There are so many homeschooling organizations now, so that in the old days, if you were a homeschooler, you'd have to create your curriculum from scratch. You were kind of on your own. But now you've got all of these organizations that have already created curriculums. Another thing to Google for would be parent-centered education or parent educators. If you Google that, you'll also get a lot on the same subject. So don't just Google homeschool, also Google parent educators to get a lot of, because that's the current and up-to-date term, and you'll get better Google results if you search under that, and you'll get lots of ideas. The other thing is that a lot of local school systems will allow homeschooled students to be involved. To be involved in the athletics of the local school system. And also, my kids were involved in the plays in our local high school, and there were a couple of cast members in the plays that were actually homeschooled kids that didn't go to our local school system, but they were still allowed to be involved in the plays because they were taxpayers in that particular school system. So there's lots of things. So if you think that if your kids are homeschooled, it's like Little House on the Prairie, and your kids are going to miss out on all this stuff, and they won't be able to do a lot of the extracurricular activities that you can only get with a big school, that's really not true. So look up this stuff. And get educated as to all of your options. You don't have to sit on your hands and take this. There's lots that we can do. And of course, you can be more effective if you do them with others that are already organized and have already, met some of the challenges in this fight. So thank you so much for joining me. Let's keep the fight going. Well, if you like what you saw, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to smack that bell.